I really think like probably the huge turning point in terms of like I wouldn't say losing the love, but wanting to transition to something new was my favorite producer, J Dilla, had passed. And
Okay.
that to me was like a huge shock to my system because that was what I like to me, that was a dream of like working for. Like, okay, the goal now is to just get in the studio with this guy or let him hear your music somehow. Just let
Right.
him know what that music, hearing Tribe Called Quest, hearing Far Side, hearing,
Mm.
Busta Rhymes stuff. And I remember just being young and looking at the credits of just like this guy is he's inhuman. So it's like the
Yeah.
fact that this music can bring you closer to somebody like that was always, I think, an aspiration of mine. Um, so at that same time, I don't know, whatever you believe in, the person above, I don't know, whatever you want to call it, it works in mysterious ways. I had a friend that got signed with an artist who was a New York City legend in house music.
I know you're talking about. Dope
Okay.
man, dope man. I know you're
Yep.
talking about him. Yeah,
Yep.
Malik.
So yeah, he was working with Kenny, and then I think we were going to some party. I forgot what party it was, but because it was somebody he had met in Kenny Dope's studio,
Okay.
and it was these two young kids at the time. If anyone has ever heard of the Martinez brothers, this
Yep.
is when the Martinez brothers were like just starting out, and I had heard of them like just in the rumblings of just learning about this new world and things like that. And we went to go check them out, and then we ended up just linking up with them at the end of the show. And I remember talking to Christian, who's the younger brother, and I forgot what record I mentioned. And the first thing he was like, "How do you know that?" And I was like, "Oh, I have that record, and I know Dilla sampled it on this." And because this kid was like probably like 15 at the time, and I'm getting closer to 20 years old, and his encyclopedia of music was just out of this world. And for him to know this obscure reference of like this progressive rock record, just we had a connection right away.
Mm.
The friend he was with, who ended up being my label partner now, I found out he lived in my town. So at the end of the night, they go to, because they're still young kids, so their parents are taking them home to go upstate. And then me and, this new friend I made, he lives in Weehawken, I live in Union City. And then the next day he's like, yo, since we definitely have like similar records, like, would you mind just playing records? Because he didn't have a setup at the time. And I
Mm.
think I was like, yeah, sure. I was like, want to come back from class, come over to my place and we'll jam out. And honestly, that turned into, like 13, 12, 13-hour sessions easily.
Mm.
Just sharing music, sharing ideas, sharing mixes and things like that. And I just like, it was a huge jump into electronic music and just sort of learning more and more about what that world looked like. Because he had been touring with Kenny before he was friends with the Martinez brothers, I think in the
Mm.
early 90s, like mid 90s, when like Kenny was at his apex. I mean, Kenny's still a force now, but at that time, it was like when Kenny was getting, when, guys were making like five figures for like a Janet Jackson remix, for a remix that you don't hear on the radio, you
Radio,
only
yeah.
hear in
Yeah.
clubs.
Yo.
So, yeah, we really hit it off. And I think just we both decided since we were both moving in the same direction, just to continue to, you know, number one, the friendship was more than anything I could have asked for. I think musically, it's important to have not only people that you connect and identify with, but people that you also share like similar values. Because especially with dance music, I feel like dance music can get very personal with the way you're presenting yourself. Because there's not an emphasis on sort of like, I mean, yeah, you can be like a top like 40 EDM DJ. Sure, there's people that are like that. But as far as the underground thing, like you're spending a lot of time trying to look for the music that you identify with, that you think works on the dance floor. So there's a lot of like being vulnerable in that. Because sometimes you hear a record and there could be a part or two in there that you don't know how it's
Feeling.
gonna
Or
go
know it's
over.
gonna hit.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely.
And then you have that moment where it's like you're like, okay, what's gonna happen? And it's like, let's say it bombs and it ruins the whole night. Like it can really defeat you.